Hello and thanks for tuning in. I am that nerd dad, Joe Williamson, and this is that Nerd Dad podcast. We have a big show today. Charles Adler is my guest. And if you don't know who Charles Adler is, time to head to your Google machine. He's a Canadian broadcasting legend. He's an Emmy Award winner, broadcasted all over North America, and known for his political takes. So naturally, I'm talking to him about country music. Because why not? Because when you find an opportunity to talk to someone like Charles Adler and he agrees to come on the show, you take it. So that's this show. Enjoy. Everyone, today my guest is legendary broadcaster. Can I call you that?
Others call me that, but it's tough for me to say. Yeah, that's what I'm a legend.
Okay, so I will call you legendary broadcaster Charles Adler.
All right,
so here, thank you. Listening to your called it a teaser yesterday of your new podcast, the first 15 minutes or so, before you launch the full episode with Ryan later on in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned you're a big fan of country music.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of country music. This was my opportunity to get you on the show. So
right.
where did the love of country music come from?
Love of country music came from my 6-year-old mind. I was raised in the big city. I was not raised in the country. I had no rural experience at all. But my mind lived in a fantasy world created by radio, and I fell in love with radio, as I think everyone knows by now. But the thing I listened to a lot on the radio was what was offered to me late at night when I was under the covers with my little earbuds in and my transistor radio, pretending that I was asleep, but of course I wasn't. I was listening to what they called the skip in those days. Skip simply meant signals from far away that you couldn't get during the day on AM, but you could get them at night, and they came from the United States. All of them did, and many, if not most of them, on any given night were coming from places like Tennessee and West Virginia and Georgia, and they were, as you can imagine, country stations generally playing music for people who were working late night, all night, and that generally meant truck drivers. So I fell in love with country music in general, and a lot of truck driver music.
A lot of truck. Yesterday you said on your show, Billy Nelson. Did you actually go by the handle Billy Nelson?
Yeah, I was Bill Nelson or Billy Nelson because I needed a name. I had two other names that I was using. I was always what some people would call work addicted or workaholic. I mean, I didn't think of myself that way. I just thought of myself as a blue collar kid who liked to work hard, and radio was my passion. And I did TV, of course, and columns and all kinds of media, but radio was the focal point. And when it came time to do a country show on the weekends, one of my several side hustles, although that's not a term we used back then. I think we just said freelancing. I got a regular gig and I'm also a freelancer. So one of my freelance gigs was a country station in the Toronto area. It was called CFGM in Richmond Hill. I can now proudly say the birthplace of Connor McDavid. Anyway, Richmond Hill is just a suburb of TO. And the signal, as all of them do on AM, boom all over the place. So it was CFGM between 1 and 6. 5-hour shift, Sunday afternoons. And my name was Bill Nelson. And at the bottom of every hour, it was, hi, this is Bill Nelson or Billy Nelson. And there's nowhere I'd rather be than right here with you. I used to say rather, but I was told it was country and people would really appreciate it. Brother. So I said, whatever you want. And the audience was amazing. There's no audience like a country audience. Every country artist will tell you that, and every country DJ will tell you that. If I had just wanted to do DJ work for the rest of my life, I definitely would have stayed a country DJ. And Bill Nelson or Billy Nelson was a good name.
Did you kind of touched on it? Did you put on a country twang? Did you lean into it?
No,
No?
just that word, and that was just kind of a little bit of a joke between the the audience and me. The thing about radio is I don't care what you're doing, regular gig, side hustle, whatever. If you're not going to be you, if you're going to pretend that you're somebody else, that's just not going to work out very well. And I don't want to get into the bowels of talk radio here, because some of it is really negative for me, but many people really rip off their listeners in talk radio by pretending to be ultra liberal, or more frequently these days ultra conservative. It's a lot of baloney for the most part, and it really does pander to the lowest level of a bottom feeder that wants to hear the hate.
I'm torn here. I'm like, do I go back to country music, or do I lean into that?
Yeah, you can go back to country. I mean,
because
you're asking for my preference. Yeah, I'd much rather talk about Patsy Cline and Eddie Arnold and Dolly Parton than Donald Trump and the right wing ecosystem. I do that a lot. That's what I've been doing for a living, as it were. And if we can get away from that to the more pleasant side of life, like country, absolutely. But it's your show. I don't want to tell you how to do your show, Joe. You can do whatever you like.
I'll go back to country music. We'll come back to mediocre talent later on, because I've heard you use the word mediocre a lot, in kind of following you the last few weeks as you get acclimated to the Crier network. I've heard you reference kind of mediocre a lot, but we'll put a pin in that. Willie Nelson's your favorite. You referred to him as your hero. Do you have a favorite Willie Nelson song? Is there one that stands out?
Oh my God. The Willie Nelson song that stands out is the one he did with Merle Haggard. Now, if I say Willie Nelson and Merle Haggard, what do you think?
Pancho and Lefty?
Joe? You bet. That's nothing. Nailed it. Nothing comes close to Pancho and Lefty. There's actually nothing. I mean, I listen to Sirius XM. I've been a Sirius XM listener for 20 plus years, and Willie's Roadhouse is my number one. My number one pick. I listen to Willie's Roadhouse some days all day, some days 50%, but it owns me. And every now and then they put a classic on that I've not heard, and I feel badly about it, because one of the best perks of the gig was I could go into the library at any time and listen to any album cut. And there is literally nothing in the dozens of albums that Willie has done. There's not a single cut that isn't playable. I honestly think that if you just did a Willie channel, you're listening to Willie 92. I think there'd be an audience for that. I really do.
There might be a confused audience if you just called it Willie 92.
Willie 92, or if you want to make it a little more diverse, Willie, Dolly, Patsy, and Eddie, or something. But if you just focused on some of the giants who have between them cut thousands of titles, you could probably have a format.
I have a soft spot for the song "Buddy" by Willie Nelson, and it's funny, but it's tied to a TV show, Parks and Rec. Ron Swanson's character loved the song "Buddy" by Willie Nelson, and I don't think I had heard it up till that point in time, but I sought it out after that show, and it just stuck with me. It just hit. Like I know Pancho Lefty, but there was something about "Buddy" that just resonates with me. So.
There's a song that I think Willie should record. I don't know if he's ever done it anywhere, but I don't think he's recorded it. And it's not "Buddy," but it's "Honey." Do you remember the song "Honey"? Bobby Goldsboro?
No, I don't.
Roger Miller has done it. Roger Miller, in my opinion, does the best. Well, I'm a huge Roger Miller fan. I can go on and on about Roger Miller. Yeah, Mr. King of the Road, Trailers for Sale or Rent. And dang me, they ought to take a rope and hang me. But Roger Miller did the best version. Janis Joplin fans will hate it when I say this, because I did love Janis, but he did Roger Miller. Okay, sorry, got to say this. Maybe it's because I'm a country fan. Maybe it's because I've been listening to country since I was a toddler. But Roger Miller did the best version of me and Bobby McGee. Okay, there, I said it. And
even better than Chris Christopherson. Hang on.
Oh yeah. And
All
Chris would be the first to admit that. I think.
Okay.
Chris has never pretended to be the greatest singer of his song. He was the greatest writer of songs.
Oh, he's
especially country
prolific
songs. If you want to talk about the best thing that, in my mind, Chris Christopherson ever did, and it always brings a tear to my eye, and no matter who does it, but especially when Johnny does it. So if I say Johnny Cash,
Sunday morning coming down,
you bet. When he's talking about the church bell ringing and the smell of the fried chicken cooking, and kids playing and people being with their kids on a Sunday, and you're all alone. That kind of Sunday morning coming down that is the epitome of loneliness. And if there's anything that country music does better than any other kind of music, it speaks to the soul, and it speaks to the lonesome in the soul. People will never want to tell you how lonely their lives are. I'm not just talking about people who aren't married or living with people or have lots of friends. You can have tons of friends, acquaintances, a marriage, a partnership, whatever, and still spend a lot of time in Lonesomeville. And nothing speaks to the lonesome than country, and nobody spoke to the lonesome better than Chris Christopherson in Sunday Morning Coming Down.
He also has a song, To Beat the Devil, where he talks about essentially his friend Johnny Cash, and maybe a bit of a deep cut. I don't think it got a lot of radio play. But
no, it didn't get all that much, but I know the cut.
Yeah, and there was something about the way he wrote, and I found even with Chris Christopherson, if you get his greatest hits, there is a soulfulness in his voice that wasn't cut for mainstream, but when he sings it, you can feel it, and it resonates.
Well, his best performance was a hit, and it certainly deserves to be a hit, and it was "Why Me, Lord."
Why Me, Lord? Yep. Man, I don't even. I have. This is a topic I'm passionate about, and not find many people who can talk to me the way you have, Mr. Adler. Patsy Cline.
You can call me Chuck or Bill, for that matter.
Bill or Billy Nelson.
Yeah.
Patsy Cline, greatest female country artist of all time.
Absolutely, yeah. Nobody comes close. As a matter of fact, it's not even fair. I'll bet you if the late great Loretta Lynn were sitting here with me, and of course Dolly Parton, I don't think they would disagree. The late Tammy Wynette, Patsy Cline. I don't know. I'm not qualified. Okay, I'm told that I'm a wordsmith, and you called me a legend, and all the rest of it. That's very kind of you, Joe. But I am not qualified to describe the magnificence of Patsy Cline. I just for anyone watching or listening who does not know who I'm talking about, just find her. You can Google Patsy Cline. Patsy Cline is not a Canadian news site. Google will not stop you from finding it. Go to YouTube. You know, you've got to experience Patsy for yourself. If someone else at a higher pay grade is qualified to describe what I mean, I think sometimes when something is so magnificent, it's like great art. I mean, do you want me to talk about the Mona Lisa? Should I describe the woman? Should I describe her eyes? You got to be kidding. Check out the Mona Lisa for yourself, and check out Patsy. And Cline is spelled C, okay? C-L-I-N-E. Not like my grandmother's maiden name, which was K-L-E-I-N, which is generally how it's spelled. It's C-L-I-N-E, Patsy Cline.
Just the greatest, and can move you, like you said, almost to the point where you're like, I don't know how to classify this. Is there anybody modern that you like? I have a feeling I know who you're going to say, but is there anybody modern you like?
Well, yeah, I love Chris.
Okay. Chris Stapleton, right?
Yeah. Chris spelled not spelled like Chris Christopherson, not K-R-I-S, but the more traditional C-H-R-I-S. I love him. And there's a Jamie that I love. Who would Jamie be?
Oh my God, I'm blanking on his name.
Jamie Johnson.
Johnson, yes, he's got that song Between Jennings and Jones.
Between Jennings and Jones was one of his hits,
Yep.
but there's nothing that he does, and I'm not a religious person. I don't attend any regular service of any organized religion, but in my quiet moments, I'll call them my lonely moments as well, I often listen to religious music. And it's just amazing how many of these country artists are at their very best doing religious music. And I'd actually include Elvis. And I know Elvis isn't considered country, but Elvis is the king. He's the king of everything. Nobody on stage, nobody that I've seen was a stronger performer, a stronger connector with the audience than Elvis Presley at every stage of his career, even at those stages that a lot of critics made fun of. And when Elvis Presley does gospel, or Willie Nelson does gospel, or we're talking about Jamie Johnson, Dolly Parton, Eddie Arnold, any of them, any of the great vocal talents, when they're doing gospel, they take it to another level, and it ain't fake. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen their eyes when they're doing gospel. Something happens.
George Carlin once said the best thing to come out of religion was the music. And I'm a disciple of George Carlin in a lot of ways, so I cannot help but agree with that. Is there anyone in the modern spectrum that you do not like, that you do not care for? I openly admit I do not like Shania Twain. I think she ruined country music in a lot of ways, because once the marketers saw, hey, I can make a little money if I just do some pop country, I thought the traditional sound went away.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I like about Shania Twain is I'm a homer. Yep. Canada is my promised land. I know what she does for Timmins. I know what she does for Canadians. And I do know that people who see Shania Twain in Vegas are seeing someone who really cares about being an entertainer. So I don't see her as a great country singer. That's just not going to happen. But do I see Shania Twain as a terrific entertainer, as someone who really connects with the audience? And remember, Joe, you get to know my life. That's the number one thing I respect in any performer. I don't care what the genre is, and I don't care whether it's radio or TV, podcasting, speech making. It doesn't matter to me. There are very, very few people that I have seen, as I say, with my own eyes, who can really connect with an audience. And I put athletes in the. I'm not talking about how an athlete, shoots a puck or swings a bat. That's a whole different thing. And at the major league level, a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of humanity, far less than 0.5%, can do with the professional athletes we see are doing. That's why I can't stand to see anybody booing an athlete. I get really, really messed up about that. These people who are there, they beat the odds in terms of talent, pure physical talent, but they also beat the odds as far as mental talent goes. You have got to be mentally incredibly tough to play at a major league level. But when they're on the air, when they're speaking into the microphone on the sidelines or whatever show they're on, there are some athletes, a very tiny percentage, that can really connect with the audience, and it's impossible for me not to respect them.
You know who connects well with the audience? Mr. Charles Adler.
Well, thank you. You're very kind, Joe, and everybody at Crier has been very kind to me. I mentioned the other day that my last couple of years of broadcasting, which were the pandemic years, were the worst years of my career. I never thought that I'd lose passion for public communications, but I honestly did. And when I hung up the headphones, as it were, they weren't these headphones; they were a different set of headphones. I buried them. I never want to see them again. I never thought I'd get out of that coffin. And Crier Communications, Crier Media, you and Dean and Chris and everyone involved. I can't tell you how grateful I am for the support that Crier has given me. And I always have to throw in one other person who was my very first guest on on the podcast, and he's got his own podcast, and I always promote the heck out of him. He's kind of like the kind of like a son that I never had, and that's Ryan Jesperson in Edmonton. But between Ryan and Dean and you and the folks at Crier, it's been a really nice week.
That's good, man. Charles, you're going to make me cry here, man.
Well, it's interesting. We talk about crying, and this gets me away a little bit from country, but not too far away. And there's no rule here. We started with country, but who knows where it all goes. You'd be surprised, or maybe not, at not the hundreds, the thousands of email I got in the days, before social media, before people were texting and messaging and direct messaging and all the rest of it. I don't want to get into all the platforms, but when email was the only mail outside of snail mail, when people, of course, stopped using that a number of years ago. So for most of my talk career, email has been around, and I have gotten over the years thousands of email. And of course, I keep all of the confidences, even when I'm reading from an email, read a paragraph or two. I never mention the person's name unless they specifically ask, and that doesn't happen very, very often. So I don't mention the names, but thousands of email I have received over the years from people who say things like, I'm a grown man, I was taught not to cry, pulled off the road listening to something that you said, and cried my eyes out. I've gotten thousands of those. So what does that tell me? Well, it tells me a couple of things that have nothing to do with me. It does tell me something about the human soul and the human need to emote. And if there's anything that we can do in podcasting, broadcasting, whatever, but in what I'll just call public communications, if there's anything we can do that's positive, Joe, you, me, and everyone at Crier and everyone else, is encourage people to allow themselves a cry. They don't have to do it publicly. They don't have to come on shows. They don't have to go in front of cameras or microphones. They can just pull off on the side of the road and cry their eyes out.
We'll end it there. It's Charles Adler. You can find him on Twitter at Charles Adler. His new show is out, available on all the normal platforms. And just an honor and a treat for me. So thank you for your time today.
My pleasure, Joe. Have a great career. I really, really respect what you do. And I really respect the people who are smart enough to follow you. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. That's it. I want to thank Charles Adler for his time today. He's a very busy man, in-demand person, and I just greatly appreciate that. He took time to speak with me, and he's been super affable and giving with his knowledge and encouraging, and that is amazing. I'm like almost at a loss for words. So thank you again to Charles Adler. Check out his podcast on the Crier Media Network. Funny thing about that interview. Funny thing about it. I'll do a quick story. I'm not doing stories at the beginning anymore because I've been told to keep the intro tight. So I ramble a little at the end. This is me time now. And if you want to stop listening, go right ahead. But I appreciate it if you do. So the funny thing about this interview is I had been kind of thinking of ways to try and talk to Charles Adler, but I need a decent reason. I didn't want to just approach him and be like, can we talk? But he put up this teaser episode for his podcast, and in it, he mentioned his love of country music. So I picked up his tweet, and I retweeted it. I quote tweeted it, and I said, will that nerd dad and Charles Adler one day have a conversation regarding their love of country music? Only time will tell. and I got a DM from Charles saying, if you want to have me on the show, just ask me. I didn't have a guest this week. There was a chance there was going to be no show this week. So I was like, how about tomorrow? And he was like, sure. sometimes it just lines up. So I don't have a guest lined up for next week yet, but I didn't have one for this week, and I got one. So let's see how this all plays out. But thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Be well. Be safe. Hit subscribe. Hit follow. Hit blah, 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 blah. Appreciate you.
Thanks for listening.
Damn.